Supreme Court undercuts access to birth control under, NPR says Obamacare. It's also known as the Affordable Care Act, also known as Romney Care, because that's what it actually was. But I digress. So the U.S. Supreme Court has made it more difficult for women to get access to birth control as part of their health plans if their employer has religious or moral obligations to contraceptives. So this was Trump administration tried to push this rule, and the Supreme Court did uphold it, that now you don't have to give birth control to your employees if you claim you have a religious or moral objection. So that was upheld by the Supreme Court this morning. Amanda, have you heard about this yet, or is this your first time hearing about it?
I have heard about this. I saw it when it first dropped, and I'm absolutely disgusted, but not surprised. I mean, we all knew there was a hammer that was going to drop when they sided with DACA, when they sided with LGBTQ protections in the workplace. We knew there was going to be a hammer somewhere, and I guess this is it. I mean, it's sad.
It really does, and it's one of those things, because I agree with you completely, where it's like, okay, they're kind of making some concessions here. What are they gonna? And simultaneously, there were other rules that were like not good rulings too. So it's sort of one of those things. Like, all right, let's throw the plebs some red meat. Let's throw the plebs a bone here, and then let's do something terrible too, because we're not actually a Supreme Court to just uphold and interpret the law. Really, we're just a political football, and that's really all we're here for.
Isn't that the complete and utter truth? And it shows itself more and more, especially as people are like, well, we have to make sure Trump gets out because we don't want another Supreme Court. It all comes down to this. This is the political issue. And it's showing its ugly head right now that the court is very, very political. These people claim to be pro-life, and they don't want abortions, but then they cut off all the systems that make it so women can control their reproductive rights. And it's appalling. I mean, what do they expect? Everybody's going to be celibate? That's just not a reality.
Yeah. And, you know, I too, whenever I say like pro-life, I always do what you do. I put it in air quotes as well, because, you know, there is nothing quote unquote pro-life about that. I don't know if you want to call it a movement or what you want to call it, but, you know, if you were really quote unquote pro-life, why wouldn't you want to create a society where, you know, maybe people don't feel like they have no other option? Why wouldn't you want to create a society where, you know, birth control is easily available, where, you know,
percent of our kids don't live in poverty, where we don't have 1.36 million food insecure houses and food insecure children and students.
Right, exactly. Why not, you know, make sure prenatal care is available readily for anyone, you know, regardless of their ability to pay. Make sure that, you know, like try to make adoption services easier and better. And yeah. And like you said, people living in poverty, people, you know, all these things
are disabled. I mean, life is a lifelong process. It doesn't stop the moment somebody gives birth. Like that's it. They have a heartbeat. That is good enough. Heartbeat, pulse, we're breathing, check, done.
Yeah. We're not pro-life anymore. We were pro-life. Now that you're born. I think that was a George Carlin bit. George Carlin had like a legendary bit where he's just like, yeah, they're pro-life until you get here. Then they're
pro-birth. That's it. They're just pro-birth.
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic Carlin bit. I can't do it justice off the top of my head, but classic George Carlin bit. So that's happening. And that's just, it's amazing that with everything going on in our society, we're amidst a pandemic. There has been one of the largest wealth transfers ever seen in a way that is nothing short of criminal. I'm to the point, I feel like we need to just replace the entire federal government. We just need to start all over again. Just you're all gone. We're just replacing everybody. And yeah, big time. And I'm to the point where like, I don't even like or retweet any of these politicians at all anymore. Cause it's like, you know, they'll do these things to like appease the masses. Like, well, we need these payments. We need this, we need that. And it's like, okay, but what are you doing to fight for it? Where's the legislation? Where's the proposal? How is this going to actually be a reality? Or are you just
photo op? It's
all a photo op. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, somewhere deep in the federal government, there's like just the Ministry of Appeasement, and they just have, they're just like, tweet these nice things to the peons, so that they think, okay, yeah, someone's going to fight for this, but really, well, they're not really fighting for this. So I am just so. Meanwhile, here are our courts going, you know what? Yeah, you don't get birth control. You don't get your employer that you may or may not have a job. Well, now even if you do have a job, you may or may not have birth control. I like how it also says like religious or moral. Well, how does that? So now any employer who just says like, well, I'm morally opposed to it, they can just not provide birth control now.
Right. I mean, even an employer who wants to use it as, I mean, birth control is expensive. They have to cover those services with their health care. And it's a way for them to save money, cut the service, save the money. We see that all the time in the disabled community, even though we need these services, even though we require them to maintain a functioning quality life. Cut it. It's done. It's too much money. We can't pay for it. It's not worth it.
And this goes into the bigger theme of why in the freaking world, well, we know why, but it is just so absurd why somebody's healthcare is tied to a freaking job. It makes less than 0 cents. It makes negative sense. Like no sense at all. And it's like so many people, and I'm talking like the general public, it's just something that they've always known. So they just accept it as like a universal just reality in American life. But when you take a step back and you really break it down, you realize how absolute batshit crazy it is. And it really is. And when you talk, like, have you ever just talked to somebody from another country and explained and they're just, what?
Completely dumbfounded. They can't believe it. It's completely outside their realm of thinking that our healthcare is tied to profits, that we are denying services because they cut into profits, that we tie people to jobs that they get stuck in where they're abused and they can't leave because now they have them by the balls and their family depends on those life-saving services, because the moment they switch, then it's a pre-existing condition, or they don't get the same quality of care, or they don't get the same whatever. It's just all ridiculous. The whole system is backwards.
Beyond backwards. I mean, I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who's Canadian, and this was years ago, and he just was not at all familiar with the way the American healthcare system works. He knew the obvious that, like, yeah, in America they do it like way different, and it's very weird. But he didn't know all the ins and outs of it. So he was asking me all these questions where he's like, so you guys buy it as if it were car insurance, basically. And I said, yeah, that's essentially what we do. And we were actually having this conversation before the Affordable Care Act even. So it was even
more crazy,
even more of a Wild West. And the Affordable Care Act was a very bad plan in so many ways. It was just slightly better than absolutely nothing.
Right.
And that's why
providing fair essential services. Fair essential services.
And that's why, folks like a Dennis Kucinich, who kind of saw this for what it actually was and saw the gutting of it. Because, I mean, obviously it's a foggy memory at this point because it was so many years ago. But I remember, as I'm sure you do as well, they slowly just made it worse and worse.
Oh, yeah.
And then the big final thing was Obama just was like, public option. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Which had we had that public option, we at least would be a lot closer to a single payer system. It would be harder. And I honestly think, and again, we're just projecting here, we have no way of knowing if this would be the reality or not. I really do think that had we had that public option, you would see something like a universal system amidst the pandemic. I feel like it would be, I feel like it would just happen. So
If we would have had universal health care, or at least a public option a couple years ago, we wouldn't have nearly as many people dying right now from coronavirus, from pre-existing conditions that haven't been treated because they can't afford to go to a doctor, or because their condition, like here in Oregon, what they do is they rank conditions based on severity. Layer 0 is like healthy, you're perfectly fine, no problem. And 1,000 is like, oh, you're dead, baby. And then they only cover from 500 up. So they only cover the healthiest part of the population, leaving the sickest to just be like, sorry, guys, we'll cover the bare essential services, but that's about it.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and